Hello, and welcome to I Am Dad Podcast with Authority, Kenneth Braswell. 30 minutes of wisdom, information, resources, and nuggets to help you on your fatherhood journey. Or maybe you're just curious and want to hear some real talk about fatherhood, family, and the minds of men. Well, guess what? We got you too. Sit back, grab your pad and pen, and maybe even bring a little something to sip on. Enjoy 30 straight minutes of fatherhood, family, and fun with the Fatherhood Authority, Kenneth Braswell.
Welcome to another heartfelt episode of I Am Dad Podcast. I'm your host, Kenneth Braswell, and today we are honored to have a truly inspirational guest. He is Mr. Marvin Charles. He is the co-founder and CEO of Divine Alternatives for Dad Services, DADS. And for over 25 years, Marvin has dedicated his life to helping men reclaim their roles as loving, responsible fathers and to build stronger, healthier families. Marvin's own journey is one of incredible resilience and transformation, growing up in foster care and facing numerous challenges, including incarceration. Marvin has used his personal experiences to fuel his passion for fatherhood and community service. Alongside his wife, Jeanett, he founded DADS, a faith-based guided organization based in Seattle and Tacoma, Washington, which has positively impacted the lives of countless fathers and their children. Through programs like the 13-week parenting class DADS that provides crucial support to men coming out of addiction, incarceration, and other difficult circumstances, Marvin's work has not only helped fathers rebuild their lives, but has also created a ripple effect of positive change within the families and communities he serves. Marvin is also an accomplished author and speaker. His book, Becoming Dad, chronicles his life and the beginning of DADS, and he continues to share his story and insights across the country. Together with Jeanett, he hosts the Color Him Dads podcast, further extending his reach and impact. Today, we are excited to delve into Marvin's inspiring journey, his impact of his work with dads, and his vision for the future of fatherhood. Join me in welcoming my man, Marvin Charles. How you doing, sir?
Man, I'm excited to be here with you. You're somebody that I've admired for a long time, right around there with Dr. Wade Horn. And so it's a pleasure and an honor to be here with you on this podcast.
Well, I appreciate you, bro. I know you are a grinder, you in the field, and I always tell people that I'm honored to be on the field with so many dedicated brothers and sisters, man. And I have special love in my heart for teens, husbands and wives who are actually out here grinding in this work and handling business, right? Because we think that, that this is just charitable work. I tell people all the time that while Fathers Incorporated is charitable, we're not a charity. This is a business I'm running. And in order for me to scale, in order for it to be sustainable, I have to operate a business, that allows us to continue to do the work, but more importantly for you and I, it allows us to be in position to help people when they need us most.
Amen. And I'll tell you, to that point, my wife Jeanett was raised by a single father during the time when it was unheard of. She was born in 1966, and so her father took her, and I don't mean like belligerently took her. Him and her mother felt like it was best if he took her. She was the youngest child of 5 siblings, and so he did. And she was born in Los Angeles, and they, after 2 years, took a journey to Seattle. He was actually headed back to Ohio, where he was originally from. He made it as far as Seattle. And there were some opportunities where he could just encompass raising his daughter here in Seattle. And so he had the opportunity to bring her up until he passed away when she was 27. And I met Jeanett a little while after that. And I always say that I was raised in the foster care system, and she had her father. And a lot of the stuff that I wasn't aware of or hadn't learned yet, I really kind of got that from my wife. I realized this, and I tell young men this all the time, that person that I came married to, I got the benefits that her father put in her. Those were benefits that I got. And a lot of times we don't recognize benefits, and I hadn't recognized them either. But the longer we were together and we started having children, I started realizing that some of the things that he instilled in her were some of the things that I could get from her and instill in my own children. So it was a match made in heaven, man. You know?
Yeah, it's amazing how those things pass through. And at some point, you kind of just stimulated me to tell Jeanett that I'm coming back at her probably in the next couple of months. I'm going to have to interview her by herself. I need for her to tell her side of the dad story.
Amen.
Right, so tell her I'm coming at her. Be ready for to be on I Am Dad podcast.
Yes.
And so was that now? Typically, when we start our show, we have a question that we ask to set the stage, and I just wanted to make sure that I don't leave this out just in case it's different from the story that you just told me. And typically, what I ask people to do is tell me their daddy's story. What's your daddy's story?
You know, that's a great question because I'm in the same line of work that you are. And that's what I always say. What is your fatherhood story? But to be honest with you, I don't really have a father story, or I'm absent of the fatherhood story. And here's what I mean by that. I was 9 years old when my mother passed away. And so I had an uncle, you know the families that on the Sundays you have to dress up to go over to your relative's house and they got plastic on the furniture and all that kind of stuff. Well, these were the folks that my sister and I, after our mother passed away, my father gave us to them, and that's who we went to live with, right? And I'm telling you right away, I wore a Catholic uniform from the time I was 10 years old till I was 17 to a public school, right? I didn't have friends to play with. All that was cut away from me. And my father was a gentleman who looked up to his brother-in-law and his sister, and he was a workaholic. He couldn't read or write. He gave all his money to his sister, and I understood that to a degree, but I didn't get fathering or fathered at all from my father. And my uncle, what he portrayed. Let me give you an example. I was 11 years old and I was playing with my sister and I broke my window in my bedroom. And so he said, okay, I'm going to teach you. So he made me go and get 2 bricks from an empty yard across the street from our house. And he brought me over to our front yard where he had me break the bricks up and then kneel in them after I held 2 other stones over my head. And he said, that'll teach you not to do that again. And then he went a couple of steps farther than that, not all at the same time, but he turned the stove on and he held my hand over the stove and he said, that'll teach you not to steal. He boiled hot-boiled eggs and threatened to put it in my mouth and said, that'll teach you not to lie. So that wasn't fathering, if you know what I mean. That was intimidation. But I didn't have any experience. I came out of the foster care system, so I didn't know. I wasn't aware of that. Other people didn't do that to their kids because he would always tell me, if you don't believe I'll do it to you, ask 1, 2, and 3, which were his children, right? They were much older than me, but that's what he would do. So that was my fathering story. I just knew that I didn't want to do anything like that. But here's what's funny. And I don't mean funny in a comical way. I mean, funny is that the harder and stronger that we don't want to be like something, we find out that we'll become just like it. And I know that because I had a son, and I didn't have any fathering skills. And I found myself portraying some of those same dynamics on my son. He's my namesake, Marvin. Marvin's 35 in August. And these were some of the things that I knew. I'd always tell my wife, listen, it kept me out of prison. It kept me out of this. And it really didn't. But I just thought I could use these same tactics. And it didn't work. It didn't work at all. So my father's stories told me I needed to gain some fatherhood stuff so that I could have a proper story. And that's what we went about doing, Ken.
Yeah, I'm always makes me chuckle a little bit when I ask people that question and they say I don't have a father story. You got a daddy story. You just got to tell it. Like that's your daddy story. That's it.
Amen. Amen.
That's
Amen.
it. That's
I'll go
it.
with that. I'll
And
go.
it gives perspective, right? It gives perspective on the impact, which is why I love to hear people tell the story. And I love to challenge people. Like, so tell, if I'm giving you $1 million and I ask you the question, well, you're going to tell me. You're going to tell me something,
Yeah.
right? So it's the story. Let's hear the story. And you never know what you learn from hearing the story. You got to hear yourself tell the story. You got to hear yourself tell the story. You got to hear yourself tell the story. And then in different aspects of our lives, we hear different aspects of the story, even as we're telling it. It's like,
Yeah.
whoa, I never thought about that before. Or
Yes.
whoa, I didn't
Yes.
think about that before. Because one of those things, when we're talking about, our daddy stories, one of the epiphanies I had as I told mine, in a way that, I didn't meet him until I was 23 years old. And then several years after that, he died. He was buried with all the answers to my questions. That's how I used to tell my daddy's story. But it's like, is that the story though? That's your daddy's story, but is that the story? And over the course of my career, I've come to learn the story. And I don't describe him like that anymore.
Gotcha.
Because you and I know in this work of responsible fatherhood that parenting is a learned behavior. And we learn it from those who parented us.
No question.
And
No
there's a
question.
story behind that, right?
No
There's a
question.
story behind, there's our dad. I could go deep with people and say, what's your daddy's story?
Yes. And that's critical. So what I had to do, very similar to you, I had to recreate my daddy's story, my father's story. And because it was obvious to me. I remember my wife told me something. She said, Marvin, you can't keep doing it like this. This is my wife telling me. Well, I'm gonna listen to anybody. I'm gonna listen to her because her father raised her. You see what I'm saying? And so I thought I had to really think about that. And so then here's what happened to me. Man, my wife and I were addicts at one point in our life, and we ran into a brick wall. And here was the brick wall. I was raised in the foster care system, and now the foster care system has my children, right? And if I didn't like foster care, how was I going to subject my children to the same thing, right? So we came to a real quick conclusion that I need to go get my life right. Now, my wife wasn't really ready at that time. She wasn't even my wife. She was my girlfriend. And we had 2 children. I brought a son to the relationship. She brought a son to the relationship. So there was actually 4 children there, right? And then I said, I can't keep doing this. I need to make a decision to do something. And I didn't know what to do. I was desperate. And so we had another child. So you know what I did? I left the house one day. The child was 7 months old. And she was born in the middle of this crack binge. And I left the house one day. I got mad at everybody in my house. I cussed out everybody. I grabbed the baby, some formulas and Pampers, and I was headed to the hospital, the county hospital, to leave her on the steps of the hospital. Because I figured anybody could do better than the piss poor job I was doing, you know what I mean? And so I got to the hospital and I couldn't do it. I could not do it. I got there and I cried. I'm 40 plus years old and I cried like a baby, And I said, I know I can't keep doing this. And so I went to a woman's shelter, knocked on the door, they let me in. I have the baby with me. And I said, listen, I just don't want to keep raising this child in this environment. Can you help me? And you know what they told me? They said, we can't do anything, but your best bet is to take her to the CPS. And so I was desperate. I headed to the Child Protection Agency. And when I got there, they already had 2 children of mine. So that was making that decision in the first place was really hard. But it was some sense in that. And I like to believe that because I was desperate, it all made sense. Now, not right when I was doing it. It was only afterwards, right? But I left the baby with them and they had me sign some documents that promised that I would get my life together. So I spent the next 4 months trying to get into treatment. Once I got into treatment, seemed like just lights started coming on. Just brightness started coming on, right? I was, for the first time in my life, clean, but not incarcerated clean, if you know what I mean. You know what I mean? And so now I'm getting a chance to have some clear thoughts, and I'm thinking, okay, what do I want to do? What I really wanted to do was help my girlfriend to get clean. And that wasn't working. Well, I got to tell you, man, 2 months in, somebody invited me to church. And so I went to church in the treatment center. It was a 90-day stint. I went to church, and the pastor asked me, do you want to change your life? Do you want to build a personal relationship with Jesus Christ? And I thought, well, I was a 5-star general in Satan's army. You know what I mean? So, you know what I mean? And this can't be worse. If anything, it could be better. So I said yes, and then he baptized me, and then my first prayer was, Lord, help me put my family back together. That was the first prayer I prayed. So 30 days later, I was out of treatment, and my girlfriend was ready to come into treatment, and so she came into treatment, and she did a 90 days. I had a nice little place. She would come and have dinner with me, and then we had to show up to court, the first hearing for our children. And we went to the courts, and they really kind of gave me the runaround at first. At least I thought it was the runaround. What I didn't realize, it was the opportunity to really fight for my children, right? So the state appointed us a caseworker, and the caseworker came out after court and said, listen, her chances to get the kids is slim to none, and you have no chance. Now, the reason I didn't have a chance, because I was a man. The reason she had a chance is because it was her 5th rodeo, right? And then the lady said, you know, if you guys were married, it'd be something different. And we were in the Juvenile Justice Center when that happened. So when she disappeared, I grabbed Jeanett by the hand and said, if you will marry me, I will do everything in my power to make you the happiest woman in the world. I didn't know anything about that. I didn't have no extra special thing, but I did have a desire to want to make sure that we got our children. I believed that prayer I prayed, help me put my family back together. And so we went about that. Jeanett got out of treatment. We went and got married. We got really good support. We got a place to live. And then she was bringing the children home for the first visit. And I got a phone call. I just got off work. I got a phone call from a lady that was a search consultant. She said, is your name Marvin Charles? I thought it was a telemarketer. And I said, yeah. She said, is your birthday 4/25/55? And I was thinking, what kind of product is this where they want to know your birthday? Well, you know, man, listen, it come to find out my mother had paid this lady $400 to find me. She only lived less than a mile away from me.
Wow.
What? We went to go see. We went to go see my children, my wife, and myself went to go see my mother, my sister, and my niece. Well, after that took place, I just had this suspicion that, okay, God hears my prayer, because that was the first prayer I prayed. And we did that. And then we went to Good Morning America. We just did a whole bunch of things, flew around the world and did television shows. But when the dust settled, Jeanett and I sat in our living room and said, how can we help? There were people we got high with, we did time with, we did crime with, and how could we help them? Because they were faced with the same things we were faced with. And so that's how Dads came about. And we just started hanging out at the Juvenile Justice Center, seeing that we could take our experience and help other fathers come to know themselves, come to help their children, because there were a ton of guys, and there's still a ton of guys today who want to be connected to their children.
When you guys decided to do that, thanks for walking that journey with me. What were some of the challenges? Because I'm sure having that background and backdrop, you know, you guys went from needing help to wanting to help. Right? And it's not easy helping people. Like, what were some of the challenges you guys had in starting Dads?
You know, that's a great question, Ken. And and I say that's a great question because 25 years later plus, people just look at us like we just fell out the sky. You know what I'm saying? They don't realize all the hurdles and stuff we had, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you, this was one significant one. So I'm working a job, and Jeanett and I had to make a decision. We got 4 children at home, so we can't afford to pay daycare, right? We can't. So I go to work. We make a decision. She stays home with the kids. Well, she gets the kids off by 10 o'clock. She's at home by herself. And I built her a little office in our house. And so now she's able to see a client or two. And here was the thing that opened the door for us. Jeanett had child support issues. I didn't. And so because she was married, I was proud husband. I put her name on my bank account. You know what I mean? That's just this is my wife. And one day we go to the bank and all the money's gone because child support is snatched it because of her name on my bank account, right? That was one of the first hurdles. And so Jeanett, because she had created a relationship with her caseworker, I don't know what this sister did, but she got that money put back in our account, right? And you know me, I'm not familiar with nonprofits and all that kind of stuff. So I'm thinking, girl, if you could do that for us, well, we're going to get rich, right?
Yeah.
that was the farthest thing from the truth, right? You know, but what it did was it established a relationship with the child support person that she was working with. And so we literally would help people. We call ourselves systems navigators. And one of the systems to navigate was a child support system. Jeanett would be at home, I'd be at work, and she would be helping men navigate the child support system. We lived in a rental property, and our landlord lived next door. So she just kept seeing men come to the house, right? So the first thing she thought, we were selling drugs, right? When really what we were doing was helping these men navigate the child support system to the point where they would be cars sometimes double parked outside in our community, right? Well, that was one of the hurdles, but that hurdle turned into be a blessing. And the blessing was as child support starts seeing men who they had been trying to connecting with my wife, they wanted to know, how did you guys do that? How are you guys making these guys? And then through Jeanett, they would be connecting with the child support system. So they literally appointed a liaison person to work with her, right? And if these guys are coming in and not having any problems, then maybe we ought to be able to. And Jeanett would negotiate. I think she owed like $17,000, and she literally worked that down to a zero plus. And so she felt like she could do that for other people. I'll tell you, the first client we had, he owed $132,000 in child support. Had been to prison twice. And decided he didn't want to do that anymore. So he came to see us. And Jeanett got his child support modified down to $11,000, which was his original order, right? And so we were able to use that kind of information and knowledge and help other folks in our community. So that was the big piece that opened the door for us in our community.
Yeah, well, when you look at, I'm listening to your story, and so I'm going to assume that the incarceration happened prior to this, not
Prior
after.
to that, yes.
So
yes.
when you look back at everything that you guys had gone through, like there was no limits for you. Like nothing frightened you. There's nothing in front of you that could be more scary than what you've already gone through.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. It
And
does.
so you go in with a different boldness. So what was it about the past of your life that really allowed you to thrive in this area of your life?
Well, see, I met a gentleman who was a Caucasian gentleman, and I wasn't big on mentors. I had mentors in the street, but I didn't have any mentors when it came. And this guy really looked after me. This is what he said to me. He said, I want my friends to be your friends and your friends to be my friends. And I was like, okay. I don't know what that
Be careful what you ask for, right?
Right. But you know what? He did. He made it possible for me to meet people. And so then, because we were doing this fatherhood piece and it was really at a minimal level, I wound up sitting in front of the governor at that time was Gary Locke. And I went with another gentleman, and he was trying to get the governor to sign a bill, and the governor was like, no. And so Jeanett and I told our story and why we were doing what we were doing. And the governor said, after that gentleman got finished, he said, "No, we're not going to do any of that. But if I can find out what Marvin and Jeanett are doing, I'd like to build some momentum or some." And so it was that kind of stuff that said, maybe, honey, we do have something. You know what I mean? Well, in that meeting was the head of Region 10. Now, I'm going to tell you how green I was. The head of Region 10 was sitting in that meeting, and when the meeting was over, he walked over and handed me a business card and said, "Call me," right? Well, I didn't know I didn't know him from a can of paint. I didn't know who he was, right? And so he had another gentleman that worked for him that we knew a little bit about in the community, and his name was Levi Fisher.
Okay.
And Levi showed up at my door, and he said, "My boss gave you a card and told you to call him. How come you didn't call him?" I'm like, I don't know him from a can of paint. No, you know? But because of my relationship with Levi, he began to walk us through all the doors we needed to because we were growing in this nonprofit arena. So that's where I met Dr. Wade Horn. That's where I started meeting people, Dr. Ken Canfield. I really started meeting people who then gave us at least the confidence that we were onto something.
Right.
We were onto something. And so we just kept putting one foot in front of the other and just kept marching. There was a lot of stuff we learned. I went to Dr. Canfield and took some trainings, right? ICANN of fatherhood. And the problem was, though, Ken, that stuff wasn't working for men in the hood.
I was just getting ready to go that way. You rolling right into where we was going. Keep on going. Keep going.
It just wasn't working. And so I needed to find some stuff that was going to work for guys in the hood, man. You know, these cats they weren't coming home and having 6 o'clock dinner, you know?
Right.
It just what happened. And it didn't even happen for me. You know what I mean? I was looking at everything through the lens that I was in. I had 7 children by 5 different women, man. You know what I'm saying? And so how do you navigate those waters is what I was learning as I was trying to teach at the same time, man. And so I learned some of these, and I took some of these classes, and I started opening the door to have meetings with other men, and we would talk about these things. And what do we do? How do we navigate this? And I just committed myself to be the person, the front runner, to find out how we navigate these. And it started building a movement, right? One of the first sayings I had was, we're going to put the word neighbor back in hood. Everybody was talking about the neighborhood, the hood, but no, let's find a way to put neighbor back in hood and then go from there. And so that was just one of the starts. Those were just the ways we had to do it. And it was hard. It was tough.
Yeah. But I'm sure that along the way, you discovered that you had skill sets that you didn't even know you had. Right? Because out of that, you developed a curriculum, right?
Yes.
So talk about like what you poured into that curriculum. I'm sure it was a mesh between your own lived experiences and what you were dealing with as it relates to these fathers, and how do you mesh the two of those together?
Well, here was the blessing. The blessing was, on this journey, I met a gentleman, and you know him well, George Williams. George Williams was a guy that we did our little stint with Dr. Canfield at the National Center for Fathering. And he was in the process of writing a curriculum called Quenching the Father's Thirst. And so I got a hold of that curriculum. I got some training on the curriculum, and I went right to the penitentiary. So we were taking this curriculum to the halfway houses where men were coming out of prison. Because one of the things that became real clear to me, if you connect a father with his children on his way out of prison, he won't return. He won't return. So we started really working with that. Well, I did that for about 15 years, and then I wrote a book And the book was getting some kind of rave reviews locally. And so I went to George and said, George, is there a possibility to be able to take this book and turn it into a curriculum? And he said, most definitely. He said, let's work with it. Let's see what it. You have more than what I have. You have experiences. I didn't have experience. I was just putting some knowledge together. But you have experience, and I think people will relate to your experiences. And so it took us about 2 years to craft this thing, right? And I was talking about the fact that when I got out of treatment, I took a parenting class. The parenting class was a Black effective parenting, but there were a lot of components that were missing to that. And so I just used my experience to those components that were missing. And we've been using that curriculum for the last 5 years.
And so, but when you think about the dads that, as you're developing this curriculum and you're thinking about the dads you're serving, like at the end of the curriculum or at the end that these guys go through the curriculum, what are you hoping that they would be able to accomplish?
Wow. Another great question. What I hope is that they would understand the importance of their roles in the children's lives and the roles of the lives of the children's mother, the importance. One of the things I always say that a father's job is to prepare his children for a future that he will never see. Usually think along those lines, right? We don't think of preparing. We just think of being there. Well, it's more than just being there, right? Your children, I know this for a fact, your children will come to you and pose questions and thought process to you. And if you don't have answers for it, guess what? They're going to go find answers. They're going to go to the streets and find answers. Well, I went to the streets looking for answers. And you know what? I got my answers from players and pimps and stuff like that, right? And I spent 20 years following them. And when it was all said and done, I was no better off. So I'm learning and had learned that we have to fill that with something else. And you know what? Being there. I'll tell you this, Ken. One of the things, and my curriculum says, is one of the things that children best want from their parents, especially their father, is time. That's what they want time. And as a Black man, I never had time for nothing else but me, right? I just didn't have time. And I realized that was the nemesis that put my children on a path of destruction. So I want to share that with every man that is willing to hear it. Those things we did, well, I got to go be on my grind. I got to be down for my crown. I got to do all of that. Well, that doesn't help your child at all. In fact, this is what you'll get. Based on my own personal experience, you'll be going to bail your child out. I've had to do that. You'll be in a position, and I don't know no father that wants to plan of going to bail his child out of jail or go watch his child, visit child in the penitentiary. You know what I mean?
Right.
No. So that's what we found out, is that if you spend quality time with your children, that you will get quality results from them, right? You'll get quality results. I have 4 boys and 4 girls, and that wasn't easy. It wasn't easy. My children told me, Dad, you're spending all your time with dads. Now, I'm not in the streets, right? I'm doing something straight, right?
Right.
Even that has an opportunity to get in the way. So we just try to share that through our curriculum to fathers, that the best results for them, for their children, is to spend time with them.
Yeah, there is sacrificing good work. There's sacrificing calling, meaning that when you have a calling, something gets sacrificed.
Yes.
Right? It's just the nature of the beast. It is like when you get called to do something and something is calling you, it means that it's calling you from something. It's calling you to something, but it's also pulling you from something.
Yes.
And unfortunately, many of those times what is pulling us away from is our families.
Yes.
Like, how have you been able to balance work life with
Well,
your wife and with your family? How do you, with this passion that you both have now, I'm going to assume you're like, my wife and I have figured out how to somewhat disconnect from the work when we're at home. Now she could still be cooking. I walk in the door and I'll come downstairs and stick my head in the refrigerator, and she goes, "Did you sign that memo you supposed to sign last night?" Like that still happens, right? So how have
yeah.
you been able to juggle that?
Hey, so my blessing is, as you know, I work closely with my wife. We work together. We have a new office. We got a new building 2 years ago, and so she has the corner office, and I have the long office, and so we work together. But there's days, and I also have a 15-year-old at home, right? And
Mhm.
um, and I I fumbled the ball the first 10 years. Let me get that out the way. I fumbled
Okay.
the ball, right? I have some children that are still a little warm with me about that, but as they grow older, they're starting to soften up a little bit. But
Okay.
you know what I mean? Dad, you
Mhm.
didn't come. You were so busy at work. You missed my games, and I still get that. So that's I like you're saying there's a calling, but you're called away from something, not just called to something. And
Right.
so I lived that experience, right? And
Right.
my wife was better at that than I was.
Mm.
And then, so I got a second opportunity. And what I mean by that is, um, I had a baby at 54. She's my youngest child, 15. She's a stellar student and the whole 9 yards. She was in private school. She has a group of friends that she's had ever since kindergarten, and they stay.
Mhm.
So I think really she's the one that I really has spent some quality fatherhood time with, right? My older children, my adult children, I get to spend adult time with them, and I
Right.
think because I spend the adult time with them, I've been forgiven. I'll just say that, right? They're happy.
Mhm.
I have grandchildren from a few of them, and I just go over and do what most grandpa does. You spoil the hell out of the grandchildren, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that gives you favor with your adult children. At least I'm learning that. I had to experience that in order to find that out. But
Right.
but they seem to think that the father role that I played, they're softening up a little bit, was that it was the best thing for their father. They know my background, they know my history, they know the getting loaded, the drinking, they all of that. They know that, and so now I'm able to give them some pertinent information around being parents themselves. Right?
Mhm.
I have a son and a son-in-law that are going to be taking our course, right? Because they have young kids, and
Mhm.
to be able to offer that is an amazing thing to be able to do, right? Uh,
Right.
it's just I've managed to not dodge the bullet. I'm just still living within that bullet. That
That's a good way of putting that.
yeah.
'Cause you like me, I also have a 15-year-old in my house.
uh,
He is I call him our surprise blessing.
yeah, there you go. There you go.
Right. And so wasn't expecting him, but blessing nonetheless. And he has truly, blessed our lives. He's my only boy. I have 5 children, 4 girls. He's the only
Okay,
boy.
okay, okay.
And so I've come to learn a lot about myself in raising him. There are moments, and there's still moments in my life, where I feel like I'm parenting myself through him,
Amen.
like that I'm trying to give him all the things that I didn't have. Last night, he plays AAU basketball, and so he is my child. He's very logical. He's very smart, high IQ. He's an honor student. He plays basketball very, very well. He's got the total package. But when I look at him and I think about myself, I had it too. I
Uh-huh.
just didn't do what I was supposed to do with it, and I didn't have the support to cultivate what I had to. No one saw in me what I see in him. and
Amen.
right. And so where I'm going with this is my next question for you, because me and this guy, we were joking on the bench about kids who don't play, right? And so he was saying to me, he said I should charge my child for paying to watch me on the bench. I gotta watch her on the bench. She should be paying to watch me sitting on the bench, watching her on the bench. And we started laughing. And she goes, and he said, there's times that, I don't, feel like coming to the game because it's just an effort in driving her to the game and sitting on the bench, watching her sitting on the bench. I could, she could sit on the bench and I could be doing something else.
Yeah.
And when he said it, I was like, we were laughing about it. And I said, but you can never replace the presence. It doesn't matter that she's on the bench. All she knows is that while she's sitting on the bench, she sees you.
Yes.
And you're there. And that level of commitment, that's to my point, it's my obligation to give it to him, because I now know how valuable that would have been to me if I had it. And so because I know the value, I gotta, whatever it is, to the extent possible, I gotta be there, because he's gonna look up and look for you. And so when it comes to that with your children, what are some of the things that you do to always, regardless of your calling to and calling from, what are some of the things you do to always remain present?
I dropped that ball big time for a few of my children. I have my two youngest sons. One is 32 and one is 35. And one is 6'9" and one's 6'7". And
Wow.
they played basketball like crazy. I have one son that just retired from playing overseas. And it was really contentious because I was telling them they didn't work hard enough. And they was like, how do you know? You don't come to the games. I mean, that was the kind of our conversations, right? Well, if you work harder, maybe I'd come. I mean, this was brand new to me, right?
Wow.
And by the time I had a son that played championship basketball, high school, and then one day we get into an argument, and this is a good conversation piece. I said, "Listen, man, if you just do this, you listen." He said, "Dad, miss me with that. I got this, right?" And so it made me feel like, okay, well, I played high school basketball, and I made the mistake. I didn't have parents following me or helping me or supporting me. So I transferred the school that I was at, which was an all-white school, and went to an all-black school. They didn't even look at me. And there was a guy who was 6'5" I was 6'1 and a half. I could step the ball with one hand. They didn't even look at me, right? So my son, years later, my son was playing ball, and he was upset with the fact that he didn't feel like he was getting his breaks. "I'm going to transfer." And I said, "No, you're not. No, you're not. Because I'm not going to let you experience what I experienced, right? You're going to leave one program, go to a program, and you don't have any investments there. They don't have any investments in you, so you can't do that." And he was bitter about it for a while, but my son surprised the heck out of me when he got ready to retire. He said, "Dad, I need to talk to you. I need to talk to you about relationships and what I'm going to do." He said, "I see how you treat my mom. And I want to do the same thing." I said, "Well, listen, I'm here for you, and I'm going to give you everything I got." And he said this to me, "And Dad, you don't have to worry about me not listening." To me, that was a badge of honor that my baby boy gave me, right?
Wow, that's a breakthrough, bro.
You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? And so I'm just telling you, I have my other son who's 35. He has two children now, and their mother was killed in a car accident a couple of years ago. And so he got custody of the kids. We had to work very hard. But because my wife and I are in the fatherhood realm, we knew stuff that the average person didn't know or wouldn't know. And it was right during COVID. So we were just all over the place, but he finally got it. And I think that's what gave him gave me favor with him because there was the years of not really supporting them came back around full circle where now all I could do is support them because now they're fathers. They have families and they needed some insight on that, right? And so I got kind of blessed, and I think it's the same thing with my daughters. They have children now, all but two of them, and I get to weigh in, and that's a privilege. That's a privilege.
Yeah. Wow. As you're working with dads today, because we're working with a different generation of dads, right? From what you and I know and what we
Yep,
grew up
yep,
as and what we
yep.
grew up being. These Gen Zers, they're a little different. As you're seeing these dads coming to you, what are some of the differences? What are you seeing with respect to their needs and what you're providing most for them as these younger dads are walking into the door?
Well, see, I don't know if I've just been blessed with this opportunity, but most of the guys that we're seeing are guys who are sick and tired of going through what they're going through, right? We have a awesome recruiting session. One of my guys, he really dives in. So when a father comes in for services like parenting plan or custody services, we offer them the class. We offer them a class. We sign them up. It's a 13-week class. And most of these guys, we go head on for 13 weeks. And these are guys from different countries, different nationalities, and they sit in a room. And what we're finding out is that these guys are bonding over the thing. And here's the thing. Somebody says, what do you do with dads? And we say we listen. Because one of the common themes that I'm hearing from the Gen Zs and everybody else is nobody ever hears me.
Right.
Nobody listens to me. So we make that be our priority. We listen. And because we're able to hear them, we're able to navigate them. Now, here's something I found out. Years and years ago, when I was putting my family together, this guy came into my home. He's a dear friend to me today. But he came into my home, and one day he just stood up before me and asked me to stand up, and he looked me in my eyes, and he put his hands on my shoulder, and he said, "You are my beloved son in whom I'm well pleased." And I said, "So why did you do that?" He said, "But Marvin, you've never been validated, and I want to validate you." And so when he did that, I immediately turned around, and my two youngest boys were 11 and 14. And I validated them because I said to myself, I had to wait till I'm 45 years old to get validated. I don't want them to suffer like that, right? And so I told you that story because what we do is we have a graduation. We go through the curriculum. These guys show up. I have 12 to 14 guys per class. We do a graduation after 2 classes. And then we get them caps and gowns. And I got to tell you, I saw a friend of mine, a very good friend of mine, doing the same thing with his, and I thought, hey, that's not a bad idea. So I gave him some caps and gowns. But what we do, we give them certificates, but then we have them stand up in front of their families and everything. We provide a meal, and I walk before each man and say, "You are my beloved son in whom I'm well pleased," and validate them. Well, the last time we did a graduation, there was one guy at the very end of the line who said he saw me coming to him and he turned around, and then he turned back around and I was able to validate him and we hugged. I gave him a big hug. Well, when he got a chance to accept his certificate, this is what he said. He said, "I've never been hugged by a man."
Wow.
There wasn't a dry eye in the house, including me. You know what I mean? You think, how can that be? We live in the 21st century, man. How is that?
Right.
So what we found out is that these guys are not so standoffish, not so, they jump in this thing. I've got guys who've been sitting in our classroom with ankle bracelets on. And you know what? After the ankle bracelets, their life is straight. They do things that, this is what one young man said to me. He said, "OG, you guys, I wish we had more guys that paid attention to us. that were willing to give us knowledge and stuff, because there's a bunch of us out here that know we need the knowledge, but nobody wants to give it to it. So it changed my perspective about that, right?
Right.
Changed my perspective, and I'm just willing and open to give these young men, within reason, within the scope in which I live, hey man, come on in, sit down. I keep my door open. They can call me and reach out to me at any given time, because that's our future.
Wow. What's a good day for you when you come in the house and you're like, you know what, today was a good day? Like, what happened in this day that makes it a good day?
Wow. In my case, I usually do that on Saturdays because I look at the whole week. I don't get a chance to breathe on a weekday, but it's those days like that I can look at the week and see that family's been connected, family's been reconnected. I heard this phrase one time, first-time fathers. Well, I got guys coming out of the penitentiary that have never been a father before, but have children. That's a first-time father to me, right? And so when I can look back over the week and see a good week is, I have a young man, Dwight. This will be the last story. I have a young man, Dwight, who is 30-something years old. 5 years ago, he went to prison. His uncle came to me and said, I know you can help my son, my nephew. I know you can help him. I know you can help him. And I was like, oh, okay. So I went to his house, and I didn't really know what to tell him, but he told me he was a father and had a 2-year-old daughter. So I said, let me see her. So he showed me she was a beautiful child. So I started inviting him to a weekly support group. We have a Bible study as a weekly support group. This was 5 years ago. And then we went down to the courthouse to see him get sentenced. And the judge said this to him. He said, I got to give you this time. It's 5 years. I got to give it to you. But I can tell you've changed. Now, this is in the 2 months that we've been working with. I can tell you can change because I've given you enough time that where you could have ran off and never came back, and you came back. So I know you changed. And he looked at me and said, I don't know, whatever you're doing, stay doing it, right?
Wow.
Well, he got out of prison 2 months ago. And he came here, and I gave him the biggest hug and told him I had his back. And he got a job, with the Pepsi Cola company, man. And that's really hard to do here, right? Especially out of prison. But he's committed to his daughter, who's 6 years old now, to her mother. He wants to do it. So we're looking for him a place. And those are the things that make me think it's a good day. Those are the things that make me feel like I'm on the right track. I'm doing the right thing. When I can take a young man like that and keep him focused after 5 years in prison. Yeah, those are my good days.
Wow. Man, Marvin, thank you so much, brother. I appreciate you. The world appreciates you. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep showing up where God tells you to show up.
Amen.
Because you never know what that person is going to need from you, but it's exactly what you got. And so don't hold back and give it up. To my I Am Dad podcast listeners, I like to leave you. Always be kind to others as you're kind to yourself, or you might find yourself by yourself. Always shoot high for your goals, because even if you miss, you'll be amongst the stars. And as my good friend Art Mitchell always said to me, it's nice to be important, but you know what? It's much more important to be nice. Until next Sunday, God bless and peace out.
Thank you so much for taking the time to spend with us. You've been listening to I Am Dad podcast. We hope that you have been informed, encouraged you to think, or even inspired your heart for the love of dads. The conversation does not end here. Come back and join us next week. Same time, same place. Or you can continue the dialogue on our I Am Dad Facebook page. We also invite you to listen to past episodes, learn more about us, and keep up with special activities by visiting IamDadPodcast.com. That's IamDadPodcast.com. Until next time, I leave you with this reminder of manhood from 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 11. When I was a child, I spoke as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. Because of this reminder, I will always understand that I am Dad, period.